Well, you wake up every morning, and if you're a sports fan, you never know what's going to happen. Most days, nothing until the evening when the games are played.
We knew this was going to happen with baseball, though. Bob.
At this time of year, yeah, and there's lots more to be done. I don't know whether there's anything more to be done by the Toronto Blue Jays, but there's lots more to be done by other teams. But something happened today, and we're on top of it. Our friend JP Morosi will join us from Ann Arbor, Michigan. Sorry to say. And we'll
Have you been to Ann Arbor, Bob? Have you been to Ann Arbor?
I have not.
Ann Arbor is a beautiful little town.
Well, it
really
is. It's in Michigan. It's blue and gold.
We have huge audiences in Michigan. You don't want to turn them off.
I have no disrespect for our audience in Michigan.
Huge audience.
It does not have the same cachet as the audience in the great state of Ohio. Quit dragging me into this.
We're huge. We're huge in Toledo. We're huge in Dayton.
JP Morosi, when we come back after these messages. McCown and Shannon back with you. The danger of doing a podcast like this is, for those that aren't aware, we do not do it live per se.
What?
We record these things.
Seriously?
Well, it's live to tape.
Now that's an old Hollywood thing, right?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness!
Taped in front of a live audience.
A live studio audience, like Carson, right?
That's right.
But it is the morning of, and what we discuss now, by the time you hear this, may be complete nonsense. So we give you fair warning. But it is that time of year, and this is the kind of thing that happens. JP Morosi joins us from Michigan. Well, yesterday we spent time talking about the prospect of Freddie Freeman becoming a Toronto Blue Jay and maybe Kyle Schwarber becoming a Toronto Blue Jay. And this morning we woke up to the news that it's neither of them. It's actually Matt Chapman of the Oakland A's.
Yeah.
Give us what you've heard in these early morning hours, Mr. Morosi.
Well, Bob and John, always love chatting with you both. Bob, I thought you were going to say joining us from the greatest city within the greatest state, but we can have that conversation later on about Michigan. I would say this with Matt Chapman. First of all, the quick, glib, but somewhat accurate thing to say is the last time the Jays acquired Oakland's third baseman, it turned out pretty well. Josh Donaldson.
Was that Donaldson guy, huh?
Right, exactly. Donaldson wins the MVP in his first year with the Blue Jays. Also, Chapman, when you look at the totality of what he brings, he's coming off a tough year. He struck out more than 200 times. It was not his finest work. He did have hip surgery going back earlier in his career, but he is an elite defender. And when I look at this team's run prevention, Chapman at third and Vladdy at first sounds significantly better than Vladdy at third and Freeman at first. He's a younger player than Freeman. Of course, 2 years of control yet. The Jays have an abundance of middle infielders in their farm system from which to trade. It's a deal that makes sense for the Toronto Blue Jays and makes their defense a lot better. And I think Chapman's going to be a better offensive player going forward in a lineup where, candidly, he doesn't have to carry the same burden that he did in Oakland. So I like the deal. I would have liked Freeman for different reasons, but I really believe the Chapman fit is an obvious one and a strong one for the Toronto Blue Jays.
I don't disagree with anything you've said, with this exception. One of the things the Toronto Blue Jays have needed is a left-handed bat in their lineup. And you know, I don't have to explain to you the significance of that, it forces other managers to make decisions and make moves. It gives you a different look. And that left-handed bat in the upper part of the Blue Jays lineup would be probably significant. Chapman is a right-handed hitter, prone to striking out, did not make good contact last year, does not get a lot of singles, a lot of base hits. He is principally at the plate a power hitter. And nothing wrong with that, except the Blue Jays have a whole team of those guys. So those are the negatives I bring on to Chapman. The positive, as you illustrated, is he is an elite defensive third baseman. And while Freeman is how bad can you be at first base? Freeman's, more than good enough defensively at first base.
Sure.
But now you have the question mark of moving Vladdy over to third. and what are the negatives defensively there. So I get what you're saying. It's an interesting alternative. What are you hearing on Freeman? There are a bunch of teams that have been interested in him. Although there was a report, as we said, yesterday or the day before, that the Blue Jays were going to announce his signing.
Freeman, to me, is someone who they liked and still have a lot of regard for. Of course, as we know, both of his parents are from Ontario, his late mother. Certainly, Freddie wanted to honor her, most importantly, by representing Canada at the last WBC. So there would have been an incredible story had Freddie signed with the Blue Jays from a standpoint of his personal family story. I believe he had talked years ago about his mother working in one of the office towers in downtown Toronto. So it's a pretty remarkable story for his family. But I think Freeman right now, you would probably say most likely goes to the Dodgers. It's the team that is still out there, and unless the Red Sox jump in and make a really compelling offer, which is possible now that Schwarber has gone to the Phillies. That was other new news in the morning that Schwarber had an agreement with the Phillies. And Schwarber was a player that I thought really fit the Blue Jays as well, because he could play left field, first base, and DH. I think you're right, Bob, that there's a real dearth of left-handed power, certainly on this team, and even left-handed contact. I would look to the outfield, though, but this is where it would have to be a two-part move, and I'm not sure if the Jays are comfortable doing that. And what I would mean by that is, if you sign someone like a Michael Conforto, do you sign Conforto and then you'd probably have to trade Grichuk or Gurriel if you can find a way to make that money work elsewhere and move those contracts. So I think that, because you look at it, and if healthy, Springer is there and Teoscar has to be there every day. And so then the other two pieces are Grichuk and Gurriel. You can rotate through a DH at some point. To me, there's a natural place for a left-handed bat who is a left fielder / DH, and Schwarber could have done that in addition to playing first base. So I really think the Jays' interest in Schwarber was at least as strong and perhaps even stronger than their interest in Freddie Freeman. So I think we have to wait and see what the last little piece is there. But I do believe, Bob, to your point, getting a lefty bat is, and remains a Jays priority, even as they make the move for Matt Chapman.
You know, it's interesting that JP, I liked Freeman. Freeman, how do you not like Freeman, right?
Right.
But I did not want Guerrero to leave first base. I just didn't. There was too many good things happening to upset the apple cart. So getting a solid defensive third baseman, someone who, by the way, forget about the last third baseman that the Jays got from the A's. The last infielder the Jays got from the A's did pretty darn well too, right, in his first year after having a bad year in Oakland. And that was Marcus Semien, right? So when you think about perhaps Chapman can come into a situation in Toronto and hit the ball better, albeit we know how well he can play defensively. And I think that's so important. They're not going to replace the 125 RBIs yet, but they're going to improve themselves defensively. Right. And I think that's important.
Well, and I think too, just to piggyback on that, the importance of the defense. You've got at least two left-handers in the rotation in Kikuchi and Ryu, and neither one is really known as a strikeout pitcher per se. And so when you think about that, a lefty pitcher, you're going to face a lot of righty bats. The ball's going to be in play a fair amount, and it's going to probably be in play on the ground. And you think about Chapman and how well he would work with Bo Bichette. It really, especially when you need to rely on Ryu and Kikuchi, it is a really strong way to orient your run prevention. So I'm excited about how this team's going to come together. You look at, again, Kikuchi was a great move to add him. Gausman, of course, as we've talked about before, there's a lot of really exciting developments with this team. And while last year was disappointing, coming just a win or two shy of the playoffs and going on to see a team that won one fewer game in Atlanta, winning the World Series, it's a really good storyline. Even as they've lost Robbie Ray this offseason, you look at the players out, players in. Yes, they lost Ray. Yes, they lost Semien, but they've brought in Gausman, Kikuchi, now Chapman. It's a really competitive team in what should be a very balanced division as well.
Not to beat a dead horse, But as a third baseman, is the artificial turf an advantage or a disadvantage?
Well, that's a great question, John, because obviously Chapman is someone who has, in the past, I alluded to the surgery that he had, and the turf can be a challenge. There's no question about that. I also think that the turf at Rogers Center today is different and better than it was 10 and 15 years ago. I think it's much easier on your body. So I think that would hopefully help Matt out a little bit. And I think it's crucial that they've got, and this is where a player like Biggio is important, Espinal is important, to spot them in here and there in different spots. I think it was not going to be tenable for them to have both Biggio and Espinal playing every day. But now if they're going to share time at second base in something of a utility role for either, I think that's a very workable scenario for the Blue Jays.
I suspect there are not many Oakland A's fans watching or listening to this broadcast. However, you have to feel a little sympathetic to that fan base if you consider that over the last 14 months or so, I don't know the exact time frame, they've lost 3/4 of their infield.
Right.
Well, not lost, but traded away 3/4 of their
another rebuild in the Bay.
It is. That's how they've and to piggyback on that point, Bob, as well. Oakland and Cincinnati both have been the major sellers this week. Oakland has had success with this mentality in the past. They've drafted well. They've been able to replenish with some of the players they've gotten back in these trades. Obviously, the irony is Donaldson arrived in a similar type of a situation. They got Donaldson from Chicago for Rich Harden years and years ago. Of course, Rich Harden, great Canadian pitcher, and they end up getting Donaldson, and then years later they trade Donaldson. It's how Oakland does business. Cincinnati, it's maybe a bit more dramatic because they haven't gone this route in the past. And it would not surprise me at all if before Eugenio Suarez and Jesse Winker were traded to Seattle, if that same package of players, the Suarez contract, of course, he plays third base, Winker, lefty bat, plays the outfield. I would expect that same package was discussed with Toronto before they ended up moving to Seattle. And one final point on lefty bats, I mentioned ideas of how they could potentially bring in a bat and then maybe trade a Gurriel or a Grichuk. One name to watch there, Eddie Rosario. I've heard his name mentioned before. Eddie Rosario, of course, a hero for the Braves last year in the playoffs. He bats left-handed. From Puerto Rico, of course, Charlie Montoyo knows him through those connections. I do think Eddie Rosario is one more name to watch very carefully there for the Jays in the outfield.
Another name linked to the Blue Jays. I mean, there's been plenty, and we caution fans not, and I think they probably know that at this time of year, everybody's got a rumor. They're flying all over the place.
Sure. And even more so this year, though, Bob, when you think about this short window after the collective bargaining agreement was signed and everybody's supposed to be in either Arizona or Florida within the next 5 or 6 days. I mean, this is like opening the doors at Filene's basement.
Yeah, basically, guys, I haven't been sleeping because I've got this plus the NHL trade deadline. So this is like my favorite week of the year.
JP,
all at the same time, Bob.
Bob is so excited about that deadline.
Do not try and link the NHL trade deadline to what is going on in baseball right now, as if there's some kind of parallel.
Feels very similar to me, Bob, but I'll set that aside, my friend. Yeah, this is your radio program. I'm just a guest.
Have your encyclopedia at hand, because 99% of the deals that take place, you'll have to go to the book and say, "Who the hell's that guy?"
It's okay, JP. On Monday, we can just call offline, okay, and then we can talk.
Well, I'm gonna be texting John throughout the day to get his analysis, so I can sound intelligent. It's more intelligent than I deserve when talking to my Red Wings colleagues here.
Even a hockey puck like Shannon will have to have that book at hand to go, "Who's this guy?"
Hey, by the way, speaking of Cincinnati, what does this mean for Joey Votto?
Yeah, it's a great question, John, because he certainly is someone that
he's a left-handed bat at a first base. Wow.
Right. I still don't think that he becomes a Blue Jay. Now it would just be too complicated.
Oh, not now.
No, not now. I just wonder with all these, with everything that's gone on in Cincinnati, how do you look him in the eye and say, by the way, stick with us one more time?
Hard. And I think he's got 2 more years left on his deal. He had a really nice year last year. Sure. A couple of years ago, they really thought they were close to breaking through. Castellanos had a tremendous year. Jesse Winker, again, has really improved in recent years. They couldn't get close enough to really make a lot of noise down the stretch here in certainly in 2021. So It's tough because for me, Joey Votto's a Hall of Fame player. And he's now looking at the reality of probably never getting out of the first round of the playoffs as a member of the Reds. Does he get traded somewhere? Maybe one of the teams that is looking at Freeman now and doesn't get him would make that move, but he still has a lot of money doing his contract. He's an older player, difficult perhaps to get a team to take on a lot of money for an older player, but he had a tremendous year last year. And I think you're right, John, your heart goes out to him because he's been such a classy person in the game. I always enjoy my conversations with Joey, and certainly it's a tough way for him to begin the season in Cincinnati after what was a really resurgent year for him in 2021.
With JP Morosi. So now that the Oakland A's have become the official farm team of the Toronto Blue Jays, I want to take a second and compare the A's to the Tampa Bay Rays, two teams that have economic challenges and who are not afraid to move players. And while the A's almost always are surprisingly good, Tampa Bay has always been kind of a notch above. How do you compare the styles and the theories of those two teams? They're similar, but they're not identical, JP?
Correct. And you're right. I think Tampa has a unique brand. I mean, their front office is arguably the best front office in sports. When you think about what they've been able to do in that division, you think about the Red Sox and Yankees and the Jays, really, with all of the payroll and market advantages that they all have. And the Rays are the team that's probably won the most games in that division the last couple of years. And even going back further than that, they just make really, really good decisions. And they've been able to, I think, many more times than not, find undervalued players elsewhere. Randy Arozarena is one such example. They also, I think, have been more active internationally than Oakland has been. And Wander Franco was part of that in the recent group. They've also made some very good trades to get some impactful arms. Drew Rasmussen is another example. They're similar. I just think Tampa Bay, they've just been a little bit better at identifying the undervalued players elsewhere. The Oakland doesn't have a Randy Arozarena on their roster right now. And also, to your point, Bob, they've been able, I think Tampa, to their credit, has been able to avoid having to take the dramatic teardown. It's as though Tampa will make a move, they'll trade an Evan Longoria, and they stay good. Mm-hmm. And I think that they never really go all in terms of totally stretching their payroll beyond what it should be. And so that means they never have to have that down cycle. They stay, for a team that has a very structured payroll, they stay incredibly disciplined and consistent year after year. I think it's one of the great stories in sports. I know we all wish they had a new ballpark, and certainly we would have loved to have seen that the Montreal idea work. But
hold on. You would have liked to have seen it work? I mean, that 50-50 half pregnant thing.
Well, it's better for Montreal. It's better to have half a season than no season. I think. I mean, that's how I would look at it. But I think economically it would have been great for the team, that they would have been able to. Their media revenues would have expanded. They would have been able to sell them certainly in Montreal, across Canada, in English and French, and obviously still keep their rights in Tampa Bay. So, from an economic standpoint, it would have been a win. It would have brought baseball to more places. But in general, their ability to succeed despite the lack of clarity on their ballpark, I just think is extraordinary. They've just been a little bit better than Oakland. They've been a little bit better than a lot of teams here the last several years.
Well, they are the two franchises that we talk most about in terms of relocation and potential. And I guess the most likely destination, I don't know what you think, JP, but the most likely destination for the A's, if in fact they do relocate, and I think that almost has to be an inevitability, would be Vegas. And what would be intriguing there is that Vegas would then have taken the two major professional sports franchises away from the city of Oakland.
That would be
Raiders
remarkable.
Having now moved.
Right. No, that's a great point, Bob. And certainly, you know that market very well. And for me, a couple things stand out. Number one, I really believe Oakland is going to have a really thorough look at this new potential downtown East Bay site. This is probably their last chance at it, candidly. The lease has been extended on the Coliseum for another few years, but it's not forever. And it's interesting to me that basically with both the Rays and the A's, they have only a few years left on their current deals with their stadiums. The stadium deals will likely begin to conclude either during or right after the current CBA, which tells me you want to resolve those two situations. And once you do that, you go to 32 teams. And I think Las Vegas is a great case. I think Nashville is a great case. We could still see Montreal get involved in some way, shape, or form. Charlotte, whether it's Austin, Portland, maybe. But I really believe that, to your point, Bob, Vegas, if there is a 32-team Major League Baseball by the end of this decade, so by the start of 2030, if it gets to 32 teams, which I believe there's a good chance that it will, I will be stunned if there is not a team in Vegas. Stunned. And whether they go, the one irony is, Bob, is, as you know, they just built that new minor league facility in Summerlin, which I heard is really good. I've not been there myself, but I've heard it's excellent. I'm not sure what you do with that, but it does sound to me like Vegas and baseball have a chance to work exceptionally well.
Well, you can have a minor league facility for spring training and whatever, and have a major league stadium. I mean, look at the Tampa Bay, Clearwater, St. Pete area. Mm-hmm. You know, that's been one of the homes of spring baseball for years.
And JP, look what the White Sox did in Glendale.
Right.
I mean, holy smokes, that thing in Glendale, it's like a shopping mall.
It's excellent. And listen, there are, spring training has its own ability to bring in revenues. And I had somebody mention this to me the other day. You think about if and I'm getting a little bit off topic here, but if there's a team in Vegas, whether it's Oakland relocating or an expansion team, and if you realign the divisions, now that the DH is universal, and you could put Vegas, Dodgers, Angels, Padres, or however you want to arrange it, Vegas, Giants, Dodgers, Padres, whatever it might be. Think about, you're a Padre fan, you're a Giant fan, you're a Dodger fan, you're an Angels fan, and your team's going to Vegas for the weekend. You fly in, you stay, you go to the game. It is going to be an incredible advantage for baseball, especially as we see more sports betting partnerships. It is a natural fit from a marketing standpoint and from a revenue standpoint. Yeah, I think in some ways it makes perhaps even more sense geographically than hockey has made. And hockey's been in this tremendous success in Vegas. And you could have visiting fans, come for 3 games if you're a Dodger fan, or if you're a Giant fan, Padres, Angels, as opposed to the 1 game if it's hockey. So it's a tremendous boon really for revenues. And I have every expectation that we'll see a team in Vegas eventually.
Have you made it to Vegas for a hockey game yet, JP?
I have. Love it. Yeah. Great atmosphere.
Well, and one of the intriguing things is as you walk around the arena, outside the arena before a game, there are hundreds, even thousands. I don't know about thousands, but there are a whole bunch you will see people with regaled in the jerseys or paraphernalia of the visiting team.
Sure.
All the time. And I know that invariably there are a million tourists in Vegas at any one time. These are people that could be there just because that their vacation matched up. But there are a lot of fans that will travel to Vegas for a hockey game because, okay, we're going to go to Vegas. And by the way, our team is playing, so we'll get tickets for that game too.
And by the way, Vegas still, hotel prices are more reasonable than any other vacation area you can go to. I mean, Hawaii 100%. Or Mexico, you'll be paying $500-$600 for a hotel in Hawaii. You might go to Vegas for $99.
Yeah, true. Before we get off baseball and the Blue Jays.
He is going to talk about the trade deadline, JP.
Oh, he is.
Well, no,
I'm ready with some thoughts.
I'm going to leave and let you two idiots talk about it. Is there anything left for the Blue Jays to do now? I mean, among the players they've been linked to is Kenley Jansen. And we've watched him a lot the last few years. Well, you watch him all the time because the Dodgers are in the postseason. I mean, he's a relief pitcher. And I have no trust in relief pitchers. And I don't know where Kenley Jansen is right now. I know 2-3 years ago, he was the guy. He was at or near the top of the food chain among relief pitchers. Now I don't know. What do you think? And would that be a wise acquisition?
I do. Obviously, it depends on where the dollars and years are. Certainly, we saw Kenley reinvent himself at multiple different times the last couple of years. I think Dave Roberts has really managed him exceptionally well as someone who was the closer, at least in name, even as sometimes he lost that mantle temporarily. I think Kenley is someone who would have a lot of value to a team in Toronto that's trying to rebuild its bullpen. Certainly, it was a weakness last year just because of injury and inconsistency of both performance and health. There was a real revolving door there, especially in the first half of the season. So I think getting one more reliever back there who has a lot of experience, whether it is Jansen or someone else who has closed, who has been in the playoffs a lot, I think has tremendous value just in terms of stability. And that's where it comes down to the communication having to be really robust with Pete Walker, with Charlie Montoyo about exactly what the role is going to be and in days when he might not necessarily be the closer and what's expected in terms of communicating with his teammates as well. I think if you bring in Kenley Jansen, it's not just because of what he could do in the ninth inning. It is the stability and influence he would provide for the rest of what has been a somewhat transient bullpen. So I think Kenley is absolutely a guy to look at and someone that I think would really give a lot of value to the Jays beyond whatever his stats say that he does in 2022.
So here's what scares me about him. It's the same thing that scared me about Freeman is if he's available, why wouldn't an organization as progressive as the Dodgers in his case, or in the case of the Braves with Freeman, why are they going away? Why are they getting out of that business? Why are they not signing them again? What's going on that he doesn't fit into the Dodger plans? Why doesn't Freeman fit into the Braves plans? That concerns me.
No, it's a fair point, John. And I think that perhaps when you're around a player who's getting up there in years, as both Kenley and Freddie are, you maybe tend to see the flaws. Obviously, you're aware of every medical thing that has gone on during the course of their careers, which sometimes can color your perspective on them. But it's a very fair point. And Kenley has had diminished velocity at different times. He's had to find different ways to restore that velocity mechanically. He's been through a lot. And certainly there was the heart issue he went through a number of years ago that is still part of, I think, his awareness. And obviously everybody's concerned for him and his well-being. So that there are certainly elements of risk there, but he's also someone who is never afraid of the big stage because he's been on it so many times. And I really believe that he might have greater value, John and Bob, to a different team than he would have right now to the Dodgers, just because his experience to the Dodgers isn't that significant. They just won the World Series 2 years ago. They've got a lot of pitchers who have experience, whereas I think that same level of experience would be probably much more valuable to a club like the Blue Jays going forward.
We were going to take a break, and then I'm going to leave, of course, and let the two hockey pucks chat, because we sort of informally promised Morosi that he wouldn't have to do baseball. He'd get a chance to talk hockey, which no one else apparently will let him do.
That was part of the agreement, actually, Bob.
Yeah. So we'll take the break, come back with more. JP Morosi is our guest. Back after this. McCowan, Shannon, and Morosi are with you. Well, we've gone through our baseball segment, and now briefly, a look ahead to trade deadline in the National Hockey League. I turn it over to my friend, Mr. Shannon, to initiate a conversation that I probably will ignore. Go ahead.
No, Bob, you're so good at this. Bob, you make so many good points about trade deadline and how elite players don't make big trades happen at the or at least make their teams better at this time of year. It's just, nuts and bolts. That's all it is at trade deadline. But people get excited about nuts and bolts, don't they, JP?
Oh, of course we do. And by the way, I have to, before we totally leave baseball behind, our friend Shai Davidi he was the first to report the full package going back to Oakland in the Chapman deal.
Oh, good.
The players Toronto was sending: Kevin Smith, Gunnar Hoagland, Zach Logue, and Kirby Snead. So importantly, Smith was one of the Jays' top 10 prospects, according to MLBpipeline.com, but not one of their top 5.
So Smith was, remind me, Smith was one of the guys they kind of platooned at third base for a while last year, wasn't he?
Right. He's an infielder. Exactly. So and this is where they have the ability, because they have, I counted this morning, like 7 of their top 10 prospects are middle infielders, including Otto Lopez, for example, so that they're able to trade from this depth of middle infielders and make a deal like this happen with Chapman. So I'm curious to see how it all plays out. But the key thing is, I think Jays fans should be happy with both the player they got and the price they paid. So that's my final sort of closing thought on the Jays Chapman trade. Now on to hockey, because I know Bob really wants to hear me say this. First of all, the Leafs goaltending situation solved. Totally good. Shalgren is the man. I think that we can plan the parade right now. It's an amazing thing just for me to watch, sort of from a little bit of distance, just how hard it is to be the Leafs goaltender. I mean, that is the amount of pressure on these players is pretty intense, and I really think there is a lot of tension, pressure, whatever you want to call it, on the Leafs goaltending situation, and maybe having this fresh face come up, 25 years old, look good obviously in his first game, 4-0 win over Dallas. I don't know, John. What do you think? Is he the answer?
No, and I suspect that Kyle's on the phone as we speak, trying to find some way to get another full-time goaltender, because what we do know is that the former Red Wing, Peter Marazzic, is not the answer.
He's not.
And he wasn't the answer when they signed him. And it was one of the more curious signings in the off season, that they thought that Peter Marazzic was going to be the backup because Jack Campbell was going to be the starter. That Peter Marazzic would play 30 to 35 games, and he just can't. He's a streaky goaltender, and right now he's in one of those streaks where he can't stop a beach ball.
Right. Well, and to me. And this is something that really, it almost transcends hockey, transcends any particular team. But I love watching teams in any sport, and certainly in hockey, for whom you can tell they are all in right now. Mm-hmm. This is a team that you have to at least win one playoff series, or maybe 2. Because if you don't, then take a step back and say, what are we doing here? We've kept this core together year after year after year, one of the most expensive groups of forwards in the NHL, and they can't win in the playoffs unless, of course, that changes this year. So what do you then do? So it's this maximum convergence of expectations, talent, of course, the history of the organization, all those things that we love about talking about this team. But guys, it is fascinating when a team is all in and has to be all in, because if they fall short, if they don't win the first round again, there's no way that all 4 of those forwards can come back next year and say that let's run it all back again. And to say, well, it was goaltending that was the problem. How can they say that? How can they go with that approach?
When you said jump in here,
hold on. But when you said 4, I thought you were talking about the 4 people in the front office too. But that's okay.
I was talking about the big 4 forwards on there. The front office. The front office is much more of a John Shannon, Bob McCown purview than what I can say from Ann Arbor, I would say.
Well, give me a list of the goaltenders that the Toronto Maple Leafs might be looking at.
No, there's only one guy on the list.
You think it's Fleury?
Yeah, it's the only guy on the list.
That's what I think. I mean, there's no list. There is one guy. That's why I asked the question.
And how easily could they possibly fit him into the cap?
Oh, that's a big challenge.
And who can they trade to make it work?
Plus, they also have to get Fleury's permission to do it,
and they need a defenseman.
Because that's right.
You look at all these different things, and you start going down the list, guys.
Well, wait a sec. If the goaltender isn't a sieve, you don't need a defenseman.
I'm still on the Jack Campbell semi bandwagon, JP.
Off of that.
I still think that they're going to sit with Jack Campbell and think that he's the right guy. And what they're trying to find is some insurance, because I think they realize that Marazzic is not the insurance. And Shalgren, as much as Kyle Dubas probably slept for the first time in a week last night after the game, that's a dangerous road to go down if you're thinking that this guy can be your goaltender of record.
Right. And here's the thing too. We go back. I know the way that the season is playing out is frustrating and almost panic inducing for Leafs fans. But from my removed perspective on this, I realize what happened last year against Montreal happened, But if Tavares isn't hurt in the first 5 minutes of game one, they probably win that series. They probably win it in 5 games. And so this is why it's such an interesting story, because you have to say what's real and what would be an overreaction. I mean, that team, and it's been now borne out, that Montreal team was not especially good last year. They obviously relied a lot on Carey Price and a lot on Shea Weber, and they're not nearly the same team right now. And yet they found a way to beat Toronto minus John Tavares. So there are so many layers to this. I'm a huge fan. We talked about him before. Matthew Knies is a player. I would not trade him in any circumstance. I think Matthew Knies could potentially play and contribute in the NHL this year. He is that good. I don't know if he's going to sign right now, but I think he is good enough to do that. And maybe the Leafs will feel more comfortable moving somebody if they feel as though once the Gopher season is done that they're going to get Knies. It's an interesting conversation based on the cap and how they handle things going forward.
Well, look, at the Toronto Maple Leafs are not the only team looking at this time of year. Every team is looking to improve, and most of them will be unable to do so. But give me your speculation on the biggest names that you would expect to move.
Claude Giroux is going to go. I mean, Claude Giroux, who's, a very expensive player, will play his 1,000th game this week for the Philadelphia Flyers as a Flyer and then be traded within 72 hours of that great milestone. He's the biggest name in it. And it certainly looks like with what Joe Sakic is doing in Colorado, he got some cap space. He got rid of one of his centers in Tyson Jost to go to Minnesota yesterday. It certainly looks like he's trying to get everything aligned so he can get Claude Giroux into that lineup for the playoffs. Don't you think, JP?
I agree. I think that to me is the move that's been telegraphed. I think we're all expecting it. Yeah. And I would say that Colorado has to be viewed as the front runner to get Giroux. He makes a ton of sense there. I think he would really take that team from a cup contender to a cup favorite, perhaps, when you look at the way this team is playing right now. I also think Klingberg is a guy to watch, obviously very carefully in Dallas and where he might go. I think a lot of teams do need defense. And there's certainly a lot of defense out there. I'll be curious to kind of see how that next tier of defensemen down. Certainly we saw Ben Sherratt be scratched. I think that's probably an inevitable trade where he ends up going. But I think if I'm the Leafs, I'm looking at just as much at defensemen as I am at goaltending.
Yes,
I think you're right. They have to do that. And one name, again, we talked a little parochially on my part about Detroit. I think Mark Stahl, his value in the marketplace, he's not earning a huge right now. I think Stahl has probably at least as much value in the marketplace as Mark Giordano, who's gotten a bit more attention on on Giordano. But I think Stahl is someone that probably has a bit more value because of where his price point is. And I think he's actually probably outperformed Giordano this year in terms of how he's playing in Detroit versus Giordano's performance with Seattle.
I think your thought process on Giordano is that he's just too expensive. Even, I think he's at $6.5 million as a cap hit. So even in the short term of March 21st till April 30th, it's still a very expensive move to try to fit him under any cap. Mark Giordano is a competitor. He's not a number one defenseman anymore, and he can help somebody, but you're going to have to make sure. And what's going to have to happen then is you're going to have to be doing that a real
retained salary and moving it around
and have a third team involved, which I think will end up being what Ron Francis becomes, a third team in Seattle. Steve Yzerman, a third team in Detroit. Bill Armstrong, a third team in Arizona. I think that those are the guys that are going to end up deciding whether trade deadline isn't really exciting or busy or just an accounting move for a lot of teams.
Right. And of course, Chychrun, obviously there was reports on varying degrees of his severity of his injury. And certainly there's been a ton of focus on Chychrun in the last several weeks. He's another name to watch. And of course, the difference between him and Klingberg is he's got control. You don't have to trade him right now.
The thing about Klingberg in Dallas, though, is that Miro Heiskanen has mononucleosis. And how long does it take to get over mononucleosis? And the answer is you just don't know. You don't know. And Miro Heiskanen is a superstar, and Klingberg is not, but he's very, very good in the short term. Dallas needs to keep every person on that roster in order just to make the playoffs. So I think what they're going to have to do is sacrifice Klingberg's free agency in order to try to get into the playoffs. I think that's the big part.
That's tough. And I think one team I'm watching a lot in the next few days is Vancouver. Are they in? Are they out? Of course, new leadership, great new front office. What is their plan here? What is Miller available? Is Besser available?
Miller's not. There's no chance that they can get rid of JT Miller. There's no chance. Listen, they won again. They won again last night. There is a real feel that, hey, this team and Bob's buddy Bruce Boudreau has done a marvelous job in Vancouver. Miller's a cornerstone guy. He's worked himself into being a core guy. Now they have to sign him long term. That's what they have to do.
Well, I would say to you two guys, and I don't know whether you agree or disagree, that probably Jimmy Rutherford sitting there for the last few months, went to Vancouver, understood, accepted that he was going to have to rebuild this franchise, at least make significant changes. And now all of a sudden he wakes up and says, I'm not gonna break this train before it gets to the next station, because they're not out of the playoff picture by any stretch of the imagination.
Right. On the periphery, but they're not out of it. And I think to your point, to John's point earlier, I've had that thought that if the U.S. had been able to have a best on best, if we'd had a best on best Olympics, Miller is probably on that team. I mean, he's that good of a player, even at a time when I have to make this point. And as a proud American hockey person right now, last I checked, 9 of the top 21 goal scorers in the NHL are American. 9 of the top 21. That's pretty good. Pretty good.
Well, yes, JP, there's no doubt that Americans are taking over the game of hockey.
I didn't say that. I just
as Canadians are taking over the game of basketball.
By the way, I'd be more proud of your goaltending than I would be about your prowess of scoring.
But I think you look at the guys that weren't. Kyle Connor didn't even make the World Junior team, and look at him now.
What a great player.
DeBrincat was cut from his second World Junior team, and look at where he is right now. That
speaks to USA Hockey and their judgment of players.
They still want a gold medal. They still want a gold medal on that team. And by the way, the time DeBrincat was cut, that was 2017. They won a gold medal, and that team had Troy Terry, who no one thought was going to be as good as he is right now.
Right.
So that they're getting better and better year after year. It's been a pretty fun thing to watch.
See, this is exactly what happens, ladies and gentlemen, when you get two hockey pucks together and you challenge them to discuss the trade deadline. They dabble on the fringes of it for about 3 seconds and then immediately morph into other conversations that have nothing to do with the trade deadline.
We also just talked about where the Montreal Expos should be playing, all these different things. I mean, we've kind of, as Bob, when you have me on the show, you have to realize that we don't follow. Wait, where's my rundown? Did John mail it to my house? I mean, what am I supposed to be following?
We don't have no rundown.
And we haven't talked about how Jim Harbaugh became the first college football coach to hire a female graduate assistant. What a great story!
It is a great story, and we are first in setting that standard. Bob, I'm proud to be here in Ann Arbor. Jim Harbaugh made the right hire right there. I'm a proud Michigander on that news, and I think Michigan's superiority is now not even in doubt at this point in time, Bob.
Bob, JP's got to go, okay? He's got other things to do.
Yeah,
JP's
gentlemen, as always, love the conversation. There's the Buckeyes logo. I send my best wishes to all of you for the remainder of this hot stove season and the NHL trade.
And by the way, I got to tell you, this is the quietest your house has been in about 3 times. This is what is going on here. I'm not used to this.
You know what's going on right now? All 3 of my kids are at school. And many times we've been doing this when there's been either at-home school, snow day, whatever it was.
But then you speak Italian to them, and then you're giving them fruit roll-ups. There's always. It's fantastic.
There's always something going on around here.
JP Morosi's Parenting 101. It's fantastic.
All the best,
Morosi. Thank you.
All the best. Thank you. Thanks, guys.
John Paul Morosi back after these messages. Well, our thanks to Morosi.
So will this be constituted for you as a baseball show or a hockey show?
Well, clearly there was far more informative and intelligent conversation on the baseball side than on the hockey side, which was really just, and this always happens when we get to this time of year.
Yes.
You know, I tell people over and over again, there is no more overrated thing in all of sports than the hockey trade deadline. And I've said this for 20 years. And yet the same thing happens over and over and over again. And I gave you two hockey puck numbskulls an opportunity to talk about trade deadline in a real way.
Well, no, we gave you the big name. We said who was going to be traded and where he was going. We did that. Bang right out of the hopper there. We did that.
You couldn't carry on a conversation for 3 minutes on the topic, and you got flying off into the distance. And that's exactly what's going to happen on trade deadline day on TSN, on Sportsnet. It has happened over and over and over again. There isn't enough to carry 3 minutes of conversation. And those two numbskull networks are going to try and carry 8-10 hours.
I was going to propose that we do an extended 3-hour version of the podcast Monday live. That's
not happening.
Live. You know, and then we can wax poetic about that trade in 1964.
If that's what you want to do, you just demonstrated your complete and utter inability to execute that plan. With Morosi, who was more than a willing participant.
You know, John, you know those rock stars that always wanted to be baseball players, and the baseball players, baseball players that wanted to be musicians. Jon Morosi is a baseball guy that wants to be a hockey guy badly. So. Yeah, no, there's no question about it. But he loves his U.S. college hockey, and he
likes everything.
And he loves like international hockey. He was on his way to Edmonton and Red Deer within 48 hours of the World Junior Hockey Championships being shut down. He wanted to be there for that whole concept of what was going to happen in World Junior Hockey, and was so looking forward to being in Alberta over Christmas holidays. He just loves it.
Well, I know. And here you are again promoting the sport that you love the most.
Here's
you are,
the deal.
In fact, you're telling hockey stories.
I know I'm telling Morosi stories. I'm telling Morosi stories.
Well, no, telling Morosi.
We can talk about the day that John and his dad came into the studio, and his dad has never forgotten meeting you. We could talk about that too. You don't remember that, do you?
No, I don't remember that.
No,
I know. Shazam! Not surprised. What did you have for lunch yesterday?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Actually, people would be shocked that, and it's a true story. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times I would get home after doing a show when we're on radio and television, and we'd have company, or my ex would say, "Well, who was on the show today?" And I go, "I don't know."
Well, listen,
like 20 minutes after we shut the microphones off, I couldn't recall.
For everybody who's listening, just understand one thing. We try to do a simple schedule of guests and recording time for this podcast. And by the time the show is over and we sign off, the last thing we say to each other, Bob will say, "What time tomorrow?" And the producer will say, "We're doing Kelly Rudy tomorrow afternoon at 2:30 Eastern." Okay. Click, goodbye, see you tomorrow. And then invariably, the morning of the show, there will be 7 texts. What are we doing today? Yep. When are we doing it today? I mean, in one ear, one out the other. That's what it is.
Well, I don't understand it, to tell you the truth. I mean, I have a selective memory, I think. I think I have some kind of innate ability to remember things that are important. But other things I forget.
But you can tell me what was on the buffet at the Sky Dome on opening day in 1994.
Well, not exactly, but
you know what I mean. You get my point.
Well, yes. I guess my brain does not have the capacity to remember all of the insignificant little events that.
Yeah, like when we're doing when we're recording the show and who the guest is.
as a general rule, I know that I can find that out at some point before it happens. I mean, have I ever been late for a show? No.
No, what I actually been beating you for the last couple of weeks.
Well, I'm just not inclined to get on earlier because
the nattering.
Well, for a year, I'd sit here with Hugh and he and
I. He's our producer, by the way.
And sit and chat while we looked at our watch and said, "Well, I wonder if Shannon's coming." You were the last minute arrival for a long time. I just finally said, "Well, the hell with it. I'm just going to get here one."
Well, then, so you
like I used to.
You and I, yes, I know. Or you'd sit in your office and.
You good with Chapman?
Yeah, I am actually, because and we've talked about it 3 times this week, Bob. Is that I did not want to move Vladdy Guerrero off first base.
I know.
I didn't. I mean, it's too nice a situation. I don't want him to be worried about playing defense.
I understand that, but you see, like, let me give you a perfect example. The Braves have clearly replaced Freeman with Olsen.
Yes.
If the Blue Jays had acquired Olsen, I wouldn't be happy because in moving Vladdy over to third. Freeman is another level. Because
he was left-handed?
Oh, well, because he's left-handed and because he has power and he has a better average. He does everything better. He is a player that will make, I don't know, twice as much as Olsen. And it's based on his performance.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a player that raised a Spockian eyebrow for me. And I said, in that circumstance, I'm moving Guerrero to third base. Now, apparently, we're not going to be faced with that question mark. And that's fine. That's good.
And quite frankly, they obviously
another right-handed power hitting bat in the middle of the lineup. And
yeah, I wonder if we talked to Mark or Ross, will they tell us that they fell short of getting that bat from the left side into the lineup?
I think they'd have to concede that because that had to be a high priority.
Well, both of them told us after the season, our one of our biggest things to worry about is we need more hitting from the left side. We do,
and they essentially got none right as of right now.
Correct.
We got to get out of here. We'll be back tomorrow. Kelly Rudy tomorrow. What time?
I will text you. Okay.
At least once. For John Shannon, and thanks again to JP Morosi. It's McCowan. See you tomorrow. Goodbye, everybody.